What if the most important transmission in human history was never fully understood? What if a spacecraft spent 20 years crossing the void of space, descended into the gravitational arms of the most beautiful planet in our solar system, spent 13 years orbiting it in silence, and in its final dying moments sent back data that we are only now beginning to decode? Scientists are still going through it, and what they are finding is not just shocking, it is civilization altering. This is not a story about a mission that ended. This is a story about a mission that is still happening from beyond the grave. There's a silence in deep space that human beings have never been able to fully comprehend. It is not the silence of an empty room or the silence of a forest at midnight. It is the silence of distance so incomprehensible that the light itself gets tired trying to cross it. And yet, on the 15th of September in the year 2017, a machine that human beings built with their own hands, a machine assembled from metal and circuits and ambition, crossed that silence, and then disappeared into the clouds of Saturn, burning alive, transmitting data until the very last microsecond before it ceased to exist. And here is what nobody told you. The story did not end when Cassini died. The story is only now beginning to reach its most terrifying and extraordinary chapter. Think about the mathematics of what Cassini actually did. Launched in 1997, the spacecraft orbited Saturn from 2004 to 2017. That is, 13 years of continuous surveillance of a system so alien, so vast, so layered in mystery that scientists are still processing the information it collected. 13 years of images, 13 years of chemical readings, 13 years of magnetic field measurements, gravitational mapping, atmospheric sampling, and ring analysis. The data from Cassini is so dense, so layered, so enormously complex that research papers based on it are still being published as recently as 2025 and 2026. We did not just send a camera to Saturn, we sent an intelligence agency, and the intelligence it gathered is only now being fully declassified. But here's where it gets complicated, because before Cassini died, before it disintegrated in Saturn's upper atmosphere in what NASA called the grand finale, it did something that no spacecraft had ever done before. It went somewhere it was never supposed to go. In 22 last dives executed by Cassini, the mission took a risk and went where no spacecraft had dared venture, the region between Saturn and its distinctive rings. Think about what that means for a moment. The gap between Saturn and its rings, that narrow corridor of space between a planetary giant and the most iconic structure in the solar system, had never been directly measured, never been sampled, never been physically entered by any human-made object in the entire history of space exploration. Scientists thought it might be filled with debris. They thought Cassini might not survive the transit. They sent it through anyway, 22 times, because they understood that the answers they were looking for might only exist inside that gap. And what they found when they got there shattered several decades of accepted planetary science. The grand finale produced the first direct measurements of the narrow region below the rings and led to a startling discovery. Fast-moving molecules and particles smaller than 2 nanometers streaming along the plane of the rings into Saturn's atmosphere. This was not what the models predicted. This was not what the simulation suggested. Something was happening between Saturn and its rings that the scientific community had simply not anticipated. And that discovery, as significant as it was, turned out to be only the beginning of what Cassini was about to reveal in its final hours. Because there was something else, something about Saturn's magnetic field that made physicists stop what they were doing and read the data again. As NASA's Cassini spacecraft made its unprecedented series of weekly dives between Saturn and its rings, scientists found that the planet's magnetic field had no discernible tilt. Now, if you're not a physicist, that sentence might sound simple. It is not simple. It is one of the most perplexing observations in the history of planetary science. Every magnetic field ever detected on any planet with a rotating interior has a tilt, a measurable difference between its magnetic axis and its rotational axis. Earth has one. Jupiter has one. Every planet that generates a magnetic field through the churning of its interior does so in a way that produces a slight misalignment between the two axes. That misalignment is what allows scientists to calculate how fast the planet is rotating deep beneath its surface. It is fundamental to how we understand planetary interiors. Saturn's tilt was essentially zero. Not small, not minor, essentially non-existent. Researchers expected subtle irregularities that would reveal how quickly the planet rotates deep beneath its clouds. Instead, those irregularities were almost impossible to detect, forcing scientists to rethink long-standing models of Saturn's interior. What that means, in plain language, is this. To this day, scientists do not know how fast Saturn rotates at its core. We can measure everything else about it. We can calculate its mass, its atmospheric pressure, its storm, velocities. But the fundamental question of how quickly its heart is spinning remains unanswered, because the magnetic field it generates somehow is almost perfectly aligned with its rotation in a way that defies every theoretical model we have. This is not a minor gap in our knowledge. This is a fundamental mystery about the second largest planet in our solar system, and Cassini's final data made that mystery deeper, not shallower. This is not chaos. This is a planet actively resisting our attempts to understand it. Saturn's rings are, by any measure, one of the most visually stunning phenomena in the known universe. They stretch out from the planet's equator for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. They are composed of billions of individual pieces of material, ice and rock and dust, ranging in size from microscopic grains, smaller than a grain of sand, to chunks, the size of a house. They have been there for as long as human beings have been looking up at the sky. And for most of the history of planetary science, the assumption was that they had been there for billions of years, relics of the early solar system, ancient and permanent structures. Measurements suggested Saturn's spectacular rings may be far younger than researchers once believed, while ring rain showed the rings are slowly disappearing into the planet itself. Ring rain. The phrase sounds almost gentle, almost poetic. The reality is not. Ultraviolet light and magnetospheric particles ionize water molecules in the rings, giving them electric charges that pull them along magnetic field lines into Saturn. Cassini measured the infall at roughly 10,000 kilograms per second. 10,000 kilograms per second. Every second, Saturn is consuming its own rings. Every second, the structure that defines Saturn's visual identity, in every telescope, in every textbook, in every human imagination is being pulled inward and destroyed. The rings are not permanent. They are not relics of the ancient solar system. They are, in cosmic terms, temporary, a relatively recent formation that is actively eroding. And the timescale for their complete disappearance, according to the data Cassini gathered, is not billions of years from now. It is, in cosmic terms, coming soon. All of this, the magnetic field mystery, the ring rain, the particle streaming, the gravitational mapping, all of it was just the outer layer of what Cassini was actually discovering. Because the real reason that Cassini's final images and data have continued to shock the scientific world, the real reason that research papers based on its data are still being published in 2025 and 2026, the real reason that what Cassini found has implications that go far beyond planetary science, is because of two moons. Two moons that, because of what Cassini discovered, may no longer be considered lifeless. Enceladus is small. If you were looking at Saturn from space, you might almost miss it. A tiny ice-covered sphere orbiting the gas giant, reflecting sunlight with an almost perfect white sheen. For most of the history of astronomy, nobody thought about Enceladus very much. It was just another moon in a system full of moons. Then Cassini arrived, and everything changed. In 2005, shortly after arriving in orbit around the ringed planet, the joint NASA-ASA Cassini mission found plumes of water spraying up from Enceladus's south pole, clinching evidence that the moon harbored a liquid water ocean underneath its bright white icy crust. Water, liquid water, actively erupting from the surface of a moon orbiting Saturn, 1.2 billion kilometers from the sun, in a region of the solar system that scientists had long considered too cold, too distant from solar energy, too geologically dead to sustain liquid water in any form. And yet, there it was. Enormous geysers, some of the most spectacular natural phenomena in the solar system, erupting from cracks in the ice and blasting material into space at 800 miles per hour. Scientists from Southwest Research Institute discovered hydrogen gas in the plume of material erupting from Saturn's moon Enceladus. Analysis of data from NASA's Cassini spacecraft indicates that the hydrogen is best explained by chemical reactions between the moon's rocky core and warm water from its subsurface ocean. Hydrogen gas, the kind of hydrogen gas that, on Earth, is produced by hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. The kind of hydrothermal vents that, on Earth, support entire ecosystems of life that have never seen sunlight and do not need it. The kind of hydrothermal vents that origin of life scientists believe may have been the birthplace of the very first living organisms on our planet. And Cassini was detecting the chemical signature of those same vents, actively operating right now at the bottom of a hidden ocean beneath the ice of a moon of Saturn. Hydrogen is a source of chemical energy for microbes that live in the Earth's oceans near hydrothermal vents, said Dr. Hunter Waite of Southwest Research Institute. Our results indicate the same chemical energy source is present in the ocean of Enceladus. Read that again. The same chemical energy source, the same energy pathway that powers life at the bottom of Earth's oceans, is present in the ocean of a moon of Saturn. This is not poetry. This is chemistry. This is measurable, verifiable, peer-reviewed science. And it means that for the first time in human history, we had direct chemical evidence that a world other than Earth possesses not just the ingredients for life, but the energy source that life uses. Because scientists went back to Cassini's data. Years after the mission ended, researchers at laboratories across the world continued to re-examine the raw readings from Cassini's instruments with better analytical tools, better computational models, better understanding of what to look for. And in 2025, what they found elevated the Enceladus question from remarkable to extraordinary. Scientists revisiting data from Cassini spied even more tantalizing ingredients in the plumes, suites of complex organic molecules that, on Earth, are involved in the chemistry associated with even bigger compounds considered essential for biology. The discovery, published in November 2025 in Nature Astronomy, bolsters the case for follow-up missions to search for signs of life within this enigmatic moon. Complex organic molecules, not simple ones, not the basic carbon compounds that can form without any biological process. Complex organic molecules, the kind that on Earth serve as building blocks and precursors for even more complex biological chemistry. And simultaneously, in a separate study published in Science Advances in November 2025, an entirely different team of researchers made another discovery that compounded the implications of everything Cassini had found. Scientists from the University of Oxford, Southwest Research Institute, and the Planetary Science Institute confirmed heat flow at Enceladus' North Pole for the first time, not just the South Pole. This indicates that Enceladus is generating a lot more heat inside than previously known, suggesting the ocean has been stable over the long term geologically. This matters enormously, because one of the questions that had always hung over Enceladus was whether its ocean was a temporary phenomenon, a brief geological accident that would freeze over within a few million years. The confirmation of heat flow at both poles demolished that concern. Enceladus is not a temporary ocean world. It is a stable, long-term, geologically active world with a persistent global ocean that has been generating heat and chemistry for an extended and potentially enormous period of time. With earlier Cassini discoveries of salts, hydrogen, and phosphates, 5 of the 6 Knops elements essential for life have now been detected in Enceladus' plume material. Sulfur is the only one left to find. Think about what that means. Knops: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. These are the 6 elemental building blocks of life as we understand it on Earth. Every living organism on this planet is built from these 6 elements, and Cassini detected 5 of them actively erupting from the ocean of Enceladus. 5 out of 6. The last one, sulfur, has not been detected yet. But the fact that 5 have been found is not a curiosity, it is a declaration. Enceladus has the chemistry, it has the energy, it has the liquid water, it has the geological stability, it has almost everything that Earth had when life first emerged here 3.5 billion years ago. Because if Enceladus is this compelling, the second moon, Titan, presents a completely different kind of possibility. Not better, not worse, just different, and in some ways, even more philosophically unsettling. Titan is enormous. It is larger than the planet Mercury. It has a dense nitrogen-rich atmosphere, the only moon in the solar system with a substantial atmosphere of any kind. It has weather systems, it has seasons, it has clouds and rain and rivers and lakes and seas, and none of those features involve water. Titan's rain is liquid methane. Titan's rivers are carved by flowing hydrocarbons. Titan's seas are filled with ethane and methane maintained in liquid form by the extreme cold of its surface, approximately minus 179 degrees Celsius. The Cassini-Huygens mission revealed a landscape of mountains, dunes, and hydrocarbon seas, and even suggested there could be a subsurface liquid water ocean beneath its icy crust, making Titan a prime target in the search for potential extraterrestrial habitats. But in December 2025, scientists reanalyzed Cassini data on Titan's interior and published findings in the journal Nature that complicated the ocean picture. A new study, led by researchers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, reanalyzed data from the Cassini mission and suggested that Titan's interior is not a global ocean beneath a crust of ice, but partially frozen layers. Not a vast global ocean as previously theorized. Instead, slushy, partially frozen layers with pockets of liquid water, isolated, localized, but potentially still present. And even those pockets, those small reservoirs of isolated liquid water deep beneath Titan's icy crust, could represent habitable niches for microbial life. But that is not even the most extraordinary thing Cassini told us about Titan. Because in 2025, researchers published a study in the International Journal of Astrobiology that proposed something that stops you cold when you read it. New NASA research suggests that in Titan's freezing methane and ethane lakes, simple molecules could naturally arrange themselves into vesicles, tiny bubble-like structures that mimic the first steps toward life. Vesicles. On Earth, vesicles are the precursors to cell, membranes. They are the structures that billions of years ago allowed the chemistry of life to become enclosed, protected, concentrated, to become alive. And the research published in 2025 suggested a specific mechanism by which these vesicles could form in the methane seas of Titan, driven by methane raindrops splashing the surface and coating droplets in layers of organic compounds that then form closed membrane-like structures as they sink back into the liquid. The researchers wrote, "Stable vesicles will accumulate over time, and so will the corresponding stabilizing amphiphiles that are temporarily protected from decomposition. In a long-term compositional selection process, the most stable vesicles will proliferate, while less stable ones form dead ends. This leads to an evolution process, leading to increasing complexity and functionality." Increasing complexity and functionality. That is a scientific description of evolution. On a moon of Saturn, in lakes of liquid methane, under a cold orange sky. We are not talking about microbial life identical to what exists on Earth. We are talking about the possibility of a second, completely independent origin of life, life built not on water and oxygen, but on methane and hydrocarbon chemistry. Life so different from anything we know that we might not even recognize it as life if we saw it. And we are saying that the precursors to that life may already be forming right now in the seas of Titan, on a world that Cassini mapped and studied in extraordinary detail. What most people are not seeing is the full weight of what this implies. We are not talking about one world that might harbor life. We are talking about two worlds in the same planetary system, both of them revealed by the same spacecraft, each representing a completely different model of how life could emerge and persist in environments that we once considered definitively hostile to biology. Enceladus, with its warm liquid ocean, its hydrothermal. Chemistry, its 5 essential biological elements. Titan, with its methane seas, its complex organic rain, its emerging protocell chemistry. 2 moons, 2 pathways. 2 independent experiments in the origin of life, both of them active right now, both of them operating within the gravitational system of Saturn. And all of this was discovered by a single spacecraft that launched in 1997 and died in 2017. That question now sits at the center of one of the most consequential scientific missions in human history, a mission that Cassini's discoveries made not just possible, but necessary. NASA's upcoming Dragonfly mission, a rotorcraft lander set to launch in 2028, will be critical for advancing Titan science. A rotorcraft lander, a helicopter-like vehicle that will fly through Titan's atmosphere and land on multiple locations across its surface, analyzing the chemistry of its dunes, its organic-rich surface, its river deltas, and the areas where Titan's subsurface water may occasionally reach the surface. Dragonfly will go to Titan because Cassini told us Titan was worth going to. And separately, the European Space Agency is already planning a return mission to Enceladus. Plans are underway for a European mission to sample Enceladus's surface and jets, to fly through those enormous geysers with instruments far more sensitive than Cassini's, to look specifically for the biological molecules, the amino acids, the protein structures, the cell-like formations that would confirm not just habitability, but habitation. We are building the machines right now. We are writing the software. We are training the scientists, all of it driven by data that a spacecraft collected years ago and sent back to Earth before burning alive in Saturn's clouds. But there is something else about Cassini's final moments that deserves attention, something that is not about chemistry or biology or magnetic fields, something that is about the choices human beings make when they send machines into the void. When NASA decided to end the Cassini mission by plunging the spacecraft into Saturn's atmosphere, they did not do it because they had run out of ideas. They did not do it because Cassini had stopped working. They did it because of Enceladus, because of Titan. By destroying Cassini inside Saturn, NASA ensured the spacecraft could never accidentally contaminate moons such as Enceladus or Titan, worlds that may possess environments capable of supporting microbial life. Think about the philosophy embedded in that decision. We knew, from our own microbiological contamination protocols, that Cassini almost certainly carried dormant Earth microbes on its surfaces, despite every effort to sterilize it before launch. And because those microbes might theoretically survive in the conditions of Enceladus or Titan, we chose to destroy a functioning, irreplaceable scientific instrument rather than risk contaminating worlds that might already have life. That is not a small decision. That is a civilization making a moral choice about the sanctity of life, including life we have never seen, life we are not certain exists, life that might look nothing like us. We chose to destroy something precious because there was something possibly more precious that we needed to protect. And in doing so, we committed ourselves to a future in which the answer to the question of life beyond Earth remains something we have to go back and find honestly, without contamination, without shortcuts, with clean instruments and careful hands. Cassini project scientist Linda Spilker described the final images as sort of like taking a last look around your house or apartment just before you move out. You walk around the downstairs. As you go upstairs, you run your fingers along the banister, you look at your old room, and memories across the years come flooding back. That description is beautiful. But it is also incomplete. Because a house you move out of stays behind, unchanged, waiting, the Saturn system that Cassini looked at in its final hours has not stayed behind unchanged. It is moving, it is active. Enceladus is still erupting its plumes. Titan's methane rain is still falling. The rings are still dissolving 10,000 kilograms per second, falling silently into the atmosphere of the planet they once encircled. Saturn's magnetic field is still rotating in its inexplicable, almost perfectly aligned way that nobody can fully explain. The chemistry in Titan's methane seas is still organizing itself into structures of increasing complexity and functionality. The hydrothermal vents at the bottom of Enceladus's ocean are still pushing warm, mineral-rich water into a dark liquid sea that has probably been there for billions of years. All of it still happening. Right now, at this moment, while you read this. While scientists publish papers in laboratories, while engineers design missions, while governments argue about budgets, while human civilization moves forward in its complicated, contradictory, often distracted way, out there, 1.2 billion kilometers from where you are sitting, in the golden light of a distant sun, a small icy moon is erupting chemistry into space, and a world covered in liquid methane is slowly, patiently, over geological timescales, arranging itself into increasing order. And we know about it because of a spacecraft that no longer exists. According to the data that continues to emerge from Cassini's legacy, we are not looking at one extraordinary discovery. We are looking at a cascade, a chain reaction of revelations that each one amplifies the next, that each one makes the question of life in this universe not smaller and more unlikely, but larger and more probable. The real story is that the Saturn system has already answered several of the most important questions in science. It has told us that liquid water oceans can exist far beyond the habitable zone. It has told us that the chemistry of life can organize itself in environments with no sunlight. It has told us that entirely different chemical systems, methane-based, hydrocarbon-fueled, can produce structures of increasing complexity that move toward biology. It has told us that two moons in the same system can independently develop conditions for life through completely different mechanisms. And it has told us all of this through a single aging spacecraft, with instruments designed in the 1980s and 1990s, operating on software that would seem primitive by today's standards, transmitting its findings across the solar system at the speed of light to antennas on Earth, where scientists waited hours for the signal to arrive. What will we find when we go back with better tools? What has been sitting in the unreleased, unprocessed, not yet fully analyzed corners of Cassini's data archive for the past 8 years, waiting for a researcher to run it through a newer algorithm and see something that nobody saw before? What complex organic molecule has not yet been identified? What heat signature has not yet been mapped? What gravitational anomaly, what ring structure, what atmospheric phenomenon is sitting right now in a data file on a server somewhere, waiting? The mission ended in 2017. The discoveries have not ended. And the missions that Cassini made necessary, Dragonfly to Titan, the European return to Enceladus, the ongoing reanalysis of its data archive, are building toward an answer that humanity has been asking since the first person looked up at the night sky and wondered whether they were alone. We sent Cassini into Saturn because we needed to know. We are building new missions to Enceladus and Titan because Cassini told us we need to know more urgently than we realized. And somewhere in the data that Cassini collected in its 20 years of operation, in the final images it sent back in its last hours, in the chemical readings it transmitted as it dove between Saturn and its rings for the 22nd and final time, in the magnetic field measurements it took as it fell toward its own destruction. Somewhere in all of that, the answer may already exist. And that is the most terrifying and the most magnificent thing about what Cassini left behind. Not the images, not the discoveries, not the paradigm shifts and the rewritten textbooks and the new missions being planned. The most magnificent thing is the uncertainty, the open question. The door that Cassini did not close, the door it kicked wide open and then disappeared into the light. Whatever is living on Enceladus or on Titan or nowhere at all, it does not know we are coming. It does not know that a species on a small blue planet once built a machine and sent it across the solar system to find out whether it was alone. It does not know that the machine burned itself to death to protect the sanctity of whatever life might exist in those frozen seas. It does not know that right now humans are designing new machines, better machines, machines with better instruments and sharper eyes and more sensitive noses, aimed directly at the moons that Cassini revealed. And the answer, when it arrives, if it arrives, will not just change science. It will not just change what we teach in schools or what astronomers write in journals. It will change what it means to be alive on this planet. It will change the way every human being who hears the news understands their own existence. It will change the question from, are we alone in the universe, to something far more complicated, far more beautiful, and far more unsettling. Because if life exists on Enceladus, then it exists in our solar system. And if it exists in our solar system, in not one, but potentially two different forms, then the mathematics of the universe changes completely. Then life is not a miracle that happened once. Then life is something the universe does. Then life is everywhere. Then we are not the exception. We are the rule. And Cassini, burning, silent, long gone, is the spacecraft that first told us so.